So, it's the Sandman. We are finally here. Anybody who has been watching my channel for a long time, you know now that I have been eagerly anticipating this show. It is probably the one comic book adaptation I have been more focused on just in terms of how is this going to go than any other piece of fiction or comic book fiction that has been crafted before. Because the thing is, it's the Sandman. This is like the most prolific graphic novel series ever made, ever written. People have so much. There's just so much that could go wrong when translating that story. Because it is just so ethereal, it is so esoteric, and you could just mix it up so bad and turn it into something it can't be. And there's so much behind the scenes in this that interests me because Neil Gaiman is just so involved in the creation of this baby because it's his. This is Gaiman's finest work. The man has made some amazing creative stuff, but this is his baby. You know, this is the thing that kind of changed the game. I completely understand wanting to keep it together, and that's why I've always said I have been so hesitant with a Netflix release for The Sandman. Because Netflix, their track record for these kind of adaptations is middling at best. You know, if it doesn't get the love, it's canceled after one season. It changes too much and becomes distilled into something simple. And I was very just like, okay, can Neil Gaiman finally get the right team behind the scenes to make his vision come true? I'm here to say he has put together the perfect concoction to make The Sandman a viable TV series. I didn't think it'd be this good a translation, just because we are kind of in this generation where you just take the high points of a book and turn it into something more commercial. But that, I think, is the standing point, in my honest opinion, that makes this Sandman adaptation work, is that it's not trying to be anything but the book. It's honestly insane that the studio's like, yeah, we'll do it. We'll just do the book. It's updated for modern audiences, and some of the stories feature a more updated narrative, but it's like, it's the book. This isn't trying to overextend like a story from the book. It's essentially like the first two volumes of the Sandman narrative. The first maybe 10 to a certain amount of issues. That's what it is. It's not like, oh, we have to extend this first season to be the first volume so we can go there and there and there. It's more like each episode is an issue of the book, which really helps you set up how to like define the ending of each episode, where it feels like a natural progression of story. There are certain moments where I'm like, oh yeah, this feels very like a not so clean ending and it bleeds too much into the next one. But it's so strong, like just of a finality for each episode, that it's episodic television. I really dig that. It's something so strong and impressive that you don't see from this genre enough anymore, where it's just each episode has to like binge one big story. But it's like, no, if you just watch the first episode, the second episode, as standalone things, even weekly, if you did a weekly release, it's just as strong. There's a cohesive narrative in the episode where it's like, there's a conclusion to the story for this episode, much like the earlier issues of the book. And that's really impressive to see, just how strong that is of an adaptation. And look, does it fudge time a little bit? Does it kind of just change the narrative in certain aspects to give the flow of a television series? Yes, it does. Is there anything wrong with that? No, because it stays true to the essence of these characters. And I think that's really cool. This is a story that I know is going to be a little tough for some people to get into, because we're in this state of mind when it comes to DC, in particular, adaptations that are just really adult in the opposite way this is adult. We're seeing DC adaptations where it's like, oh man, dick jokes and guns killing people every 10 seconds and just mindless insanity. And that's good. But this is more adult, where it's like, how do you find purpose when your purpose is to make people happy, but you no longer feel that happiness? How do you deal with a world when everything around you feels chaotic and insane, and you are just a person stuck in your path, unsure of where to go? And suddenly it's like, how do you feel about being an immortal person in a world where maybe the people you're protecting don't really understand you? And there's just so many of these just like big ideas that are just so above the common person that's hard to make it authentic. And I really appreciate this story doing a couple of things. First off, it's staying true to the book. Second off, it's quiet. The thing about the Sandman is this isn't a story where it's just like Dr. Manhattan levels of insanity, this man overanalyzing the world and seeing what it's going to do and he has to destroy it. It's this guy trying to understand how he feels about things. It's very much just like solace and contemplation and trying to understand what your place is in a world when you don't know where you're supposed to be anymore. It's quiet. It's just scenes of people walking and talking. It's trying to understand like the joys of humanity. What is helping you build up something? How do you feel about a world that's so indifferent and tolerated? How are you supposed to act as a human? How do you make a better world? It's just these like quiet ideas that's not shouting them at you. It's just like, no, these are characters who just need to discuss it and talk about it, and that's what we're getting. And the fact that there seems to be like a wide enough appeal for that, where like it's still #1 on Netflix, that's kind of exciting. Because you don't have to do like a big action sequence the end of every episode or in every episode. You just listen to people talk, explain themselves, and understand each other's point of view or state of mind, and you get a nice sense of things going on here. Now, I will say, we're talking about Morpheus, the King of Dreams. You're talking about one of the most iconic-looking characters in graphic novel history. And Gaiman has just always been like, I need to find the right guy to make it work. How are we going to find the right face for that character? Tom Sturridge is the perfect guy for this role. He's not an actor I'm too familiar with, but he's got the right look of just, this guy doesn't look like he understands what's going on in the world, and he looks like an angel. Like, there's just like a certain level of he's too ethereal and just too dumb. And I think it's like a perfect balance where he's like, he's so stoic and stiff and delivers it with just such like, I just have to say this and I have no other feeling about what I'm saying, but that's how I'm expressing myself. To me, and I know this might just be like, I can't believe you just said that, but it's RDJ levels of casting for a comic book character. Sturridge just nails the look, the feel, the aesthetic so perfectly of how Morpheus is supposed to behave and just look, that it's utterly brilliant. He really sells like that guy who's just so unsure but certain of what he's doing. There's such a great balance to it, and he's just so perfect in that role. And he's kind of the only character that appears throughout the entirety of the show, because it is staying true to the issue. It's just staying true to like the issues being focused on a certain aspect instead of like controlling the narrative and trying to put every character in every episode. So the beginning half kind of focuses more on these one characters. It's like, oh, that's the end of this kind of arc. Then it forms to the other one, and that's the end of that arc. It's kind of brilliant in that way. I think everybody is giving a great performance. And the thing is, like, this is a prolific work, so when you get guys like David Thewlis in here, and Charles Dance, and Stephen Fry, and Mark Hamill, and Patton Oswalt, like these bigger names that are kind of more just like these, you know, genre names, and they're willing to commit to things, you get a sense like there's a big scope to here. When they're playing off of these lesser known actors, all of them doing amazing work and just committing so much to the bit. Like the young actress playing Rose Walker is really fantastic, and she is great. The actress who is playing Bet in the diner is just insane. The fact that they just dedicated an entire episode to the 24 Hours Diner storyline is kind of unbelievable, because it's like such an inconsequential thing to like the larger narrative, but it does inform like this idea of what the power of dreams can do to you. It's kind of just insane that it worked and they were able to find it, but those people were fantastic. And then you kind of like look at the rest of the larger family and you just look like Kirby Howell Besteep, something along her names, as Death, who is perfect. I was hesitant with her because I'm like, that is the one you have to get right. That is going to be the standout character for a lot of people. How do you get her right? Kirby did fantastic. She really nailed it. She made it special and cool. It might just be because I'm like a guy obsessed with the concept of death and turning that into a narrative. That was my favorite episode. Not only because it's the episode that delves into one of my favorite like minor stories in the comic of just dream kind of like making a friend of this immortal man. Like I love that concept, and I think the way they handled it in this episode was fantastic. But just like the actual balance of seeing like this woman showing the importance of humanity and her role in the world was really cool. It really got me emotional. And it was just like a strong, just kind of like palate cleanser from the stuff in like the 24-hour diner and things with like Lucifer. And again, Gwendolyn Christie, the perfect choice since Bowie's dead. I know it's Bowie, but it's like, God, she is gorgeous, powerful, strong, competent, really cool. And I love that they're like, we don't have to explain shit. You get it. That's what's so strong about this series. It's like you understand everything going on. And Mason Alexander Park's Desire, my God, what a great choice. They were so good. Just like the perfect, awkward evil. You know, it's so weird and fascinating. I really dug that. But Sturridge, holy shit, did this guy just completely understand how he was supposed to stand, how he was supposed to move. I really like it. And you might be like, oh, really? They're going to do Patton Oswalt as the voice of the Raven? Yeah, it works. It's a little jarring at first. You're like, wow, he's just so like American in this world. And it's like, no, it makes sense though. Like he is kind of just our point of view character for some of this stuff. And it's kind of cool. Jenna Coleman's Joanna Constantine is also very interesting. I know there's been like some talk like, oh, she should get the spinoff. Nah, I think she did great. We don't need to see more of that. It's amazing how well it worked. It honestly is. And there's a lot of talk going about right now, and I've played into this too a little bit, you know, of the VFX artists and everything. This looks better than a lot of other VFX that we've seen. There's definitely certain moments where you're like, oh yeah, that's clearly not great. Like the little gold dragon gargoyle thing, I don't think it looked great. But Matthew looked good. Maybe it's because it doesn't have like a big bulbous head, but there's just certain moments where it's like perfectly like together, and there's certain moments where you're like, oh, they're on a green screen, they're walking in nothingness, but it just looks more naturalistic and kept than other things in the genre fiction. And maybe that's just because when it comes to like this kind of aesthetic, I don't think anybody's doing it like Netflix. And I'm the first person you'll ever meet to criticize everything Netflix does. But they know how to make like fantastical genre fiction-y stories look really good. Like they are translated so perfectly, and their backdrops and there's like big canvas oil painting looking shit is gorgeous, and it's just so much nicer than bigger budgeted stories. I really respect them for that. It looks great, and the camera work, well, while simplistic, I don't think it like changes the game in terms of like camera work or lighting. There is something to be said about these certain focus shots to emulate certain panels of the book that are special, you know. And that's something too where it's like each episode has its own flow of direction and style, where the first episode is kind of this like intense bottled story, and then same with like 24/7 when you do like the bigger stories of like this young woman traveling to learn more about her origins. It's really interesting. When you go to like Hell and you deal with Lucifer, there's like this really intense, just like pitiful feeling in your stomach. Like they really balanced like the actual flow of the episodes really well, and it blends into something very special. Now the show isn't perfect. No show is really. And I think where I'm just kind of like, oh, this doesn't flow is right. It's kind of like towards more of the end, I think there's just kind of like this too much going on and they kind of lose the focus just slightly. But it's all held together in a beautiful bow that actually feels like a really good adaptation of the source material. I'm not like egregiously offended by the lack of great CG in some scenes, and some of the writing, well, on the nose is necessary. And I know there's going to be those people like, man, Neil Gaiman sold out, he's so woke, look at all this like new updated stuff. Here's what I'm going to say about that. Neil will be the first person to say that pretty much every character in the Sandman mythos that's like ethereal is androgynous, so they could be representative of anything. So if a gender is changed, that's fine. If a character is replaced with another one because we can't actually use DC characters, it's fine. When a character is suddenly kissing somebody of the same gender because they're a subsequential character to the actual story, it's fine. It's not woke. It's these natural, updated things that make sense to this story. I think that's great. Everything about the Sandman works well. The show really understood, like, we have to capture the right beats. It's not pandering to anybody. If you don't understand what's going on, sorry. but it's not even like it's a complex situation. It's just, we're not going to cookie cutter this for you. You understand the large concepts. You can deal with what we're doing. It's pretty impressive in that way. And I got to say, it surprised me in all the right ways. Now, the real testing ground is going to be if Netflix will let this grow and find larger legs, or if this is going to become a one and done. Hopefully we get more, but you got the right actors involved on every level. You got the right directors involved. Gaiman feels genuinely excited about the project. You adapted it so perfectly where each episode is almost like an issue of the book. You delved into so many great concepts that it's going to open the doors for more people to understand that Sandman is one of those books that change comics forever. It just is. Is it my personal favorite? No, I'm always the first to say I am definitely more of a Preacher guy, but that's just another conversation we could get into. It's impressive. Everything about this worked, and you will walk away believing that Tom Sturridge is the King of Dreams. That's pretty impressive. So, The Sandman, what we're all hoping is the first season of many more to come. I'm going to give an 8 out of 10. And thank you guys for watching this review. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And as always, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck. Sweet dreams.